They could tell me about our education.
May your mics are hot.
Okay, do we have an agenda here somewhere?
I'll bring you one.
Thank you. I always like the other one with a couple hours See you later.
Four.
We're going into class this
As soon as I call
Don't do anything for it.
I'd like to call the Thursday, June 25th, 2020 school board meeting to order. Please rise for the pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Member Corcoran.
Here.
Member Kettle is here. Member Olson.
Here.
Member Raphael. Here. Member Tyson.
Here.
Member Peterson.
Here.
And Member Luther is absent.
This time we'll take a motion to approve tonight's meeting agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second, discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor, signify by aye.
Aye.
Scheduled and unscheduled visitors, Member Olson.
We had 0 visitors. Lots of good discussion.
All right, student achievement, I believe we have Jeff Cat, right?
Mr. Chairman, Dr. Massey, thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight and to talk a little bit about one segment of our equity work that's taking place right here at the high school. Okay. We have a partnership with an organization called Equal Opportunity Schools. They're based out of Seattle, Washington. And their goal is to work with schools to ensure that the population of students enrolled in advanced placement and college credit bearing courses at high school are proportional to the overall demographics of the building. This is our second year of partnership with EOS. My first year here, so my first year to get to help out in facilitating this work. I wanted to show you the mission and vision of EOS, just so that you're familiar with the organization, but also to give you a chance to think about it in light of our own newly adopted this year strategic plan, mission and vision. So the EOS mission to ensure that students of color and low-income students have equitable access to America's most academically intense high school programs and succeed. And the vision is really founded on the belief that when the highest learning opportunities are equitably accessible, the highest human potential is unbounded. And I can't help but look at that and think of our own mission that we've adopted, where every student, if we do our work well, is empowered to thrive in an ever-changing world. And the vision based on excellence for every student, every day, and every experience that they have at the high school and throughout the entire district. That includes being challenged to the level of their ability and beyond in every class that they walk, in every classroom that they walk into. EOS's support is intended to help us do that. So what does EOS provide? You can really break it down into two different categories. They provide us with training, and they provide us with data. Their training are 4 different sessions facilitated by an EOS leader who comes out here and works with us in small groups of teachers, covering the following topics that are really critical to achieving educational equity. So the 4 topics in the different workshops were identifying institutional racism, examining implicit bias, developing a sense of student belonging in every classroom, and creating a culturally responsive classroom environment for all students. Again, I can't help but point out the overlap with other district-wide work. You can look at that and you can think of Everyone Belongs and those sessions that were hosted here and see a lot of similarities. So it's taking place broadly across the district, and it's taking place at this level here at the high school. The other thing they provide is data. 3 different ways of giving us information. There's 2 surveys that every student in the high school takes, and they take them during their ranger time on Mondays or Tuesdays. And EOS compiles for us the survey results regarding student interest in taking AP courses and regarding a student's sense of belonging in any course that they're taking. The idea is to give us a chance to catch kids that might be falling through the cracks of our registration process, find out who else is interested in taking an AP course that we're not hearing about through other means. They also help us track student participation in the AP courses and create data visualizations for us, and I'll show you a couple of those here in just a moment. So our plan for this year, we had 2 goals with our EOS work. We wanted to train a group of teachers in those 4 different areas critical to educational equity. And we wanted to utilize the data that EOS provided to make decisions about how we recruit students into AP classes. But of course, I realize, and I know all of you do as well, that any sentence that starts with "our plan for this school year was," the second half of that sentence is not what we thought it was going to be back in August and September. Some of that was our own doing. One learning that we walked away with is when we scheduled these sessions. We spread the 4 sessions out across the entire school year. But our goal was around student registration. So we need to have that plan in place by November at the latest. And so that's a change we want to make for this year. Additionally, the facilitator was obviously not able to come and be here in person, so EOS converted to online learning for those next 2 workshops. We got those the very last week of the school year. They were timely in the sense that everyone's sense of the need for racial equity in this whole area was extremely heightened at that point. It was not timely in the sense that teachers were trying to wrap up their final assessments and their grading for students in distance learning. So we built that into our plan for how we take on this work next year. Let me show you some of the numbers that EOS generated for us for this coming year's AP classes. What students are participating in our AP classes in this coming school year? I want to point out that this is 11th and 12th graders. We do offer 9th and 10th grade AP classes, and we can generate our own numbers for those courses. EOS's philosophy is students will have had 2 years to have been recruited at this point, into an AP class, and so that's where their focus is. There's a lot happening on this chart, I realize, so I want to point out that the goal EOS has set for us is within each racial group to have 48% of that group participating in advanced placement courses. That's where they've set the bar as an outcome for our work with them. We have no racial groups that are achieving that right now, but I want to highlight two that saw an increase from last year to this coming year in participating, or at least in registering for AP courses. One is our Hispanic group. They divide each racial group then into groups by class. So students who qualify for free and reduced lunch, that's the column on the right, labeled low income. All other students in that racial category are on the left-hand side, but they label medium to high income. You can see that we nearly achieved that goal in Hispanic students who do not qualify for free and reduced lunch, but we see a significant gap in Hispanic student participation if they do qualify. I also wanted to highlight our Black student group, which heading into next year has nearly hit that goal in both categories divided by class. Our medium and high income African American students, 43% participating in an AP course, and 40% of those who qualify for free and reduced lunch. That is growth from the previous year's numbers that EOS recorded for us. So we did see improvement in our recruitment of those students into AP classes. They give us another set of numbers to look at, which is comparing the demographics of our AP courses to those of the entire building. Whole lot of numbers up here. I want to draw your attention to two categories. One is the percent of our overall school population here at the high school that each of these groups make up. And the other is the percent of participation in our AP program. Again, this is for 11th and 12th graders. So our largest group is white students who do not qualify for free and reduced lunch. They make up 75% of our current registered student population for next year. And they make up 83% of students signed up to take AP courses. That is a disproportionality. It's 8 percentage points. It's not what we want, and we want every category proportional. It's better than it was in previous years. It's better than in other districts that I've had the opportunity to do this type of work with in previous roles before I came to Forest Lake, and it's an exciting thing to be a part of. You can also look at each of the categories within our marginalized student groups that are traditionally underserved, and we're not more than 1 percentage point off, a couple of students off from having a fully proportional AP program. So this is part of what EOS generates for us, is this concrete quantitative data, but they also give us a way to solicit student voice and qualitative data from our students with some prompts that can be used for student focus groups. I want to show you a few of those responses. I partnered with one of our deans who's been a real leader in equity work in the building here, Sarah Stratton, and we facilitated 2 different student focus groups. They were made up entirely of students of color. One group had committed to staying in their AP class for the rest of the year and taking the AP exam, and one group had elected to either drop the course or to stay in the course, but they were not going to take the exam. And we asked them questions about their experience and what led to their decision making. These are some of the comments. If I were to summarize a theme from the group that was dropping, they tended to feel like they didn't fit. Everyone else was smarter. No one else in here looks like me or has a similar background. There were comments about when there wasn't a connection with the teacher was a common theme in those that wanted to drop the class. For those students who wanted to stay in, the relationship with the teacher was at the center of that decision making. Not so much how well they thought they had mastered the material, but how connected they felt to the teacher and how they felt that teacher was explaining to them what they needed to know for the exam. Even to the point that the previous teacher that they had had before the AP course influenced their ability to feel successful. So for example, students that took English 10 in their 10th grade year and then AP language their 11th grade year felt more confident in AP language because of the relationship that they had with their 10th grade teacher and how they had prepared them. But of course, AP courses are not the only college credit earning opportunities here at the high school. And so we worked with EOS this year to expand the data that they share with us to include our CIS courses and our concurrent enrollment courses that you can take in our FACS department, our industrial tech department, and throughout our building. And this is what that chart looks like. The blue across the bottom within the different racial groups is the numbers you've already seen for AP courses. But then the green is students who have signed up for both AP and CIS, or concurrent enrollment. And the gold is just concurrent enrollment courses. If you think back to that 48% number, and then you add in our CIS and concurrent enrollment classes, every group but two is above that 48% target rate of participation within all of our racial groups. The only two that aren't are low-income students that identify as multiracial, and again, low-income students that identify as Hispanic. So this will be part of our thinking going forward, is not just the AP classes, but all of these college credit earning opportunities at the high school. Last slide, plan for this year. We want to complete the 4 equity workshops, the training, by November. And EOS is going to work with us to accelerate that process so that we can have a plan in place by the time students are registering for classes. More importantly, by the time teachers are planning how they're going to support students in that process. We're going to include 1 dual credit teacher from every department. This year was restricted to just departments that had an AP class, so we're expanding that training on cultural responsiveness, implicit bias, to more teachers for next year.
What does that mean?
So dual credit is any of those 3 different types of classes where you can earn a college credit at the same time you're earning the grade for the high school. CIS, concurrent enrollment, AP. And then we want to connect that EOS student work to the larger efforts around the strategic plan here in the district, specifically these 3 focus groups: excellence and equitable learning opportunities, in career college and future preparedness, and in fostering personal well-being in a safe and respectful environment. If you think of the 4 topics of the equity workshops through EOS, identifying institutional racism and examining implicit bias speaks directly to goal number 3, transforming systems that contribute to inequities. Developing student belonging in the classroom speaks directly to goal number 6, every student feeling safe and connected to the classroom community that they're in at any given time during the day. And then creating a culturally responsive classroom so that all students feel like any class here at the building is accessible to them and one in which they can be successful. And the teacher has instructional strategies to connect across differences with those students, gets directly at goals number 4 and 5. And I think, and we think, moves us a little bit closer to fulfilling that mission and that vision of an excellent experience every day for every student here at the high school. I appreciate the time.
Wow.
Does anybody have any questions?
I just want to say what a great presentation you just did, and this, I mean, this should be all over, and this is powerful. And I didn't realize we were doing all this within the high school. I mean, that's just amazing. And I think when you said a key point about 10th grade, some of those teachers that have empowered them to give them the confidence and the structure to actually take those classes, that is a huge thing that should really be applauded. That is good work for that teaching staff, and I'm just overwhelmed. This was just a great presentation. Thank you.
Marika?
Yeah, I have a question about, I mean, I think by the time you get to the high school and there's a choice of taking AP classes or not, you might have been in the district for a while. How are we, once we start getting better at this, how do we start moving that back into the, because by the time you get to the high school, a lot of decisions have already been made of, kind of the way you view yourself and your relationship to the classes and where you fit in. Those decisions are already sometimes made, so how do we work backwards with some of this stuff?
Speaking with Mr. Caldwell and Mr. Jacobson about this, next step that we would like to see after the EOS training is that those teachers go back to their departments, and we want to facilitate meetings with every department this year about what they view as college and career pathways, how would they actually line up those steps, and figure out the right time to extend those conversations down into the middle school. So that was a conversation that we did have the chance to have across these 2 buildings this summer.
Great.
So, I'm just curious, do you have data on how many dropouts you did have?
I mean, you give a lot of data, is there any on that? I'm just curious if it was small number.
I know off the top of my head that 15 students of color dropped because we identified every single one of those students and put them in that focus group. They dropped their classes halfway through the year. I don't know without looking the overall.
So that's
number for the
roughly,
year.
well, thank you for that. And yeah, this is excellent work. We got to see some of this in the Curriculum and Equity Committee with Mr. Ward. And I just think it's excellent work. I'm curious, what implicit bias curriculum do you use with staff?
I don't know that I would describe it as a
Great,
curriculum
isn't it?
so much as an effort to raise awareness so that all teachers understand that that is part of their daily work in the same way that it's part of my daily work and our daily work. So that people can pause and think about how that's showing up in their work. It's also paired with the data that's disaggregated by race. And so how might the one be affecting the other?
Yeah, and when I took it, I took the Ann Casey Foundation Implicit Bias course, and I just was curious if you taught a specific course or just incorporated it in a certain way. Okay, thank you.
I'm curious as to how the success rate plays out, and I don't expect you to know that off the top of your head for tonight's meeting, but plays out comparatively amongst the racial groups and then amongst the group as a whole. If we could get that at a future time, that would be great.
As far as,
Passing the test, taking and passing the test for the AP courses.
yeah, everyone is very curious in this year's AP course today,
Yeah.
particularly given the very different circumstances for the exam. And yeah, that's absolutely something we'll be able to put together and share with Dr. Massey.
And I like that now it includes CIS in all of them, because I believe when Mr. Ward brought it forward, it was just AP.
And we had to push EOS to include CIS because fundamentally, they don't consider that to be of the same rigor. And taking CIS writing from the University of Minnesota is arguably just as, if not more rigorous than an AP course.
Yeah, or engineering and drafting.
Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's good.
And I have one more question regarding some of the, like you said, the reasons that they did quit the class. Is that, I mean, I'm sure there's a plan going forward to try to address some of those concerns, right? I mean, as far as like feeling they didn't belong, I mean, those issues that you had, or, I mean, they're gonna come up with some ways to kind of work on that then, or?
Yeah, what we really want to do is link our different systems together. I mentioned Ms. Stratton earlier, who heads up our PBIS work here, which is all about community building. And so connecting these two efforts to increase what teachers are doing, particularly at the very start of the school year, to build community in their classroom before moving into rigorous content, is a big part of our next steps.
Jeff, briefly talk about the survey that kids take, because they identify a caring adult who theoretically then can be an advocate for kids to take rigorous courses and how we use those ones.
Yes, thank you. So the first survey that I described for students who might be interested in taking AP also asked them to identify who's a trusted adult that they have that's part of our school system. And they can name a teacher, a dean, either at the middle school or at the high school. And then part of our work is to get those teachers those names of students so that during our Ranger Connect or our Ranger Time, they can sit down with small groups of students and talk about next courses in their sequence where it might be the right time to take an advanced course or some other dual credit class.
And for some kids, it's overcoming the belief that I can't, and a teacher saying, oh yes, you can,
Yeah,
and you must try.
absolutely.
Marquetta?
I just want to say that I'm really impressed with the work, and the timing of all of this could not probably be any better than it is. So, nice job. Keep it up.
Member Rayfield?
Yeah, how have our numbers overall been for AP courses? Have they been somewhat static, or have they been trending upward, or how, overall, how do we look?
So second year this year of the 9-12 setup here, and we did see a slight decrease in overall AP participation, and then about that same amount currently for next year, 9-12, about 575 students or so overall that have signed up for at least one class. The number on here was lower because it's just 11th and 12th grade, but we do have those 9th and 10th grade classes as well.
Sure.
Which will be important numbers to know going forward, especially as we link up more with the middle school to prepare students right away in ninth grade for rigorous courses.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you all.
All right, moving on, reports, any workshops or conferences? I didn't suspect there was. We'll move to Member Olson with 916.
Yes, we had a special workshop outside of our meeting time. We gathered online, obviously, and watched a YouTube video of Robin DiAngelo, White Fragility, Why It's So Hard for White People to Talk About Racism. It was fantastic. I'd be happy to share that video with the board. So Jean Jordan and incoming director Scott Thomas led the discussion. And while we watched the discussion, we talked about meaningful concepts, ideas for further board development, and what do we want admin to consider in its leadership of educational equity at 916. So it was a great discussion. And I will be taking part in the IDI testing, which is the Intercultural Development Inventory, which helps individuals think about your own personal equity journey. So I think you take the test and then you walk through it with one of the directors, and they kind of guide you along there. So I'll be happy to share that as well.
Great, get the video.
Thank you, Member Olson. City of Forest Lake, Member Kettle.
I have 2 points. Number one, on behalf of the board, I'd like to thank Mayor Mara Bain for attending our last community conversation on implicit bias. I happened to be on that call, and Mara was there. She opened and she closed pretty much, and she did, I think, a really good job. So thank you very much to the Mayor of Forest Lake. Secondly, I guess the most important thing is the road work that's being done, as we all know, out on 97 in Goodview. I live with this every day because I've said I live in that neighborhood, so I keep an eye on it every day. And as far as I know, as far as I could tell, they are on schedule. They're doing a fantastic job. They're working really hard. Hopefully, they will have this all solved by the time, ideally, we have buses running back through that area. So those are the 2 reports I have.
Thank you, Member Kettle. Dr. Massey, Superintendent's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've got just a few slides I'm going to walk through. The first is a few highlights I want to recognize and acknowledge. First being, this is our first board meeting since we completed our distance learning, along with every other school in the state and frankly, I think the country. And we need to recognize the incredible effort and lift by our teachers across the district, our bus drivers, our clerical staff, our custodians, our food service staff. It was a heavy, heavy lift. And we received a lot of really good feedback. I think across the board, families were really pleased with the program. They weren't pleased with having to do distance learning, we couldn't control that. But we delivered an incredible product for our families, and we should be really proud of our system for that work.
Standing ovation.
In addition, we need to recognize the work that fell on the shoulders of our families. Families that were working from home, trying to get an elementary kid on a computer and engage with a teacher, just imagine. And middle school and high school kids, keeping high school kids focused to get to graduation. All of that was just a huge task, and if not even a burden on our community and our families. So I'd like to recognize that. This past Monday, go ahead.
Can I add something?
Yeah.
Sorry. But it's personal to me because I have a grandson who is in school, elementary school, and does not do real well in the classroom setting. He has excelled throughout the whole period with distance learning. I mean, I'm amazed at how much he's done.
Yeah, we've heard that story many times over. Kids that were thriving in the classroom struggled, not across the board. And there were kids that, boy, how come I didn't see that effort in the classroom? Because they just shined in distance learning. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
2 weeks ago, 9th through 12th graders started with online credit recovery through summer school. And this past Monday, kindergartners moving to 1st grade up to 8th grade started in classroom learning in our hybrid summer school. We're actually one of 26 districts in the state that jumped on the opportunity to bring kids back. I give Kelly Lafine and Lori Chalgren and her team a lot of credit for the work that they did to pull this together. We have just over 300 kids in summer school classrooms on a hybrid every other day model. And we're trying to figure it out. Kids are thrilled to be back, and staff are thrilled to be working with kids. And we're gonna learn a lot from this hybrid model. And if you haven't noticed, our fields have kids on them. In fact, there's a softball game going on in our softball field tonight. And kids are in weight training, they're practicing with their sports, and those guidelines and restrictions have really loosened in the last 2 weeks. And, you know, we keep our fingers crossed that kids are staying safe, but we're following CDC and MDH guidelines to a T. And it's just good for kids' psyche and emotional well-being to be back outside competing with and practicing and doing what they love to do. And lastly, of my bullets, we have successfully hired 3 amazing new leaders for our district. Lori Shelburne at Wyoming, who will be starting July 1st. Julie Hull at Scandia, who will be starting July 1st. And tonight we'll meet Gretchen Matson, who will be starting July 1st at Linwood Elementary. And I could do a lot of slides to show celebrations at our different schools, but I'll highlight graduation. Both at the community school and the high school. All of you were there. What a beautiful night. We had law enforcement and fire from many of our local communities on hand to just show support for our kids. Rave reviews from families on the drive-by graduation and the grand stage. They were able to walk across, get their diploma, and get pictures. Mom and dad were the closest they could be. They were the closest ones to their kids as they were on stage getting pictures. And you can just see the beaming faces. It was a beautiful night. In fact, there are some families that would say, don't make us sit in that stadium.
Yeah.
This is the first year that parents have had air conditioning.
That's true, it is true. Hugely successful.
So that was a lot of fun, and the high school staff and our custodial team that pulled that off, wow, it took a great vision and a lot of work, so congratulations to them.
One other comment on that, if you don't mind. I have heard from numerous people in the community, and what they say is thank you very much for going back to the original plan.
Yeah, there was a week or so, or a few days where, yeah, we made the right call, let's just leave it at that. We have received in the last week a 100-page planning document from the Minnesota Department of Education. To say it is daunting is an understatement. But it's laid out in this sort of a format, and we sent a communication email to all of our families and staff today. I shared it with the board as well. Barb Pedersen and Renee Reedy put this graphic together as a way to get people's minds around the work that we're doing in preparation for the start of the school year. And so you can see that scenario 1 is back in-person learning with CDC guidelines and protections in place. Scenario 2 is a hybrid learning model where it's some kind of a in-class and distance learning combination. And the third would be back to distance learning as we just finished. There are 4 critical strands that we're planning for each of these 3 scenarios. Student and family support, and accounting for various measures there and components. Of course, the academic structure framework and all the other components with SEL and assessments and grading and attendance that come with that. Operations, how does this work with our building, safety and security and HVAC systems? Also included in that would be transportation and food service. And then educator support, of course, and professional learning and professional development. So those would be the 4 strands as we plan out each of those 3 scenarios. Our task is to plan out each of these scenarios, not in a framework or an outline, but in explicit detail. By the start of the year, we will be able to move into any of those 3 scenarios and be ready to go hitting the ground running. So we have to, again, work out the details for each of those 3 scenarios.
So is this good, when will you know, I mean, when will you be told?
MDE will give guidance on July 27th, if not earlier, on what their recommendation will be. It's possible that they might recommend scenario one for the northwest corner of Minnesota. In the metro, they might recommend scenario 3 or 2. So it might be regional, it might be one district compared to another. And as we move through these scenario, or into the school year, we might be on one scenario, not number one, but a scenario at the start of the year. And we might need to move to another scenario based on things getting better or worse at some point during the year. So we need to have that flexibility and readiness to move in and out of these scenarios to start the year and then throughout the year.
I just have a question, Steve. Do we have the authority then, once we get going, say we're doing the hybrid model and we have cases at a certain school, do you have the authority to shut that school if it increases in cases, or does it all through MDE, and where does the decision-making lie?
Yeah, we're hoping that MDH, and I suspect MDH will be side by side with districts as we face outbreaks or conditions that need to be considered. And we'll certainly be working with our district staff, our nursing staff, who are tightly connected with MDH. So it'll be a team of folks making that call.
And
Okay.
I also, do you think it's gonna vary by age group possibly? Like elementary over high school, or are they leaning toward that at all, or?
No, I don't see that so much. I
Okay.
see that hybrid might look different based on the age level.
Okay,
But if we're in hybrid, we're in hybrid.
right,
But there may be a school with an outbreak
right,
that may not be impacting other schools.
okay,
That might mean we're going from in-person to distance in the school for a period of time.
okay.
Question on the hybrid model, is it similar, I mean, maybe this is too early to ask, but is it similar to the model we're running for summer school or not, do you think?
It'll have a lot of resemblance to what we're doing with summer school. And the good news is, we get a trial run.
Yeah,
Right,
Yeah,
that's why I asked.
yeah.
Can I ask one more question? How about busing for summer school? How are they managing that?
We have, Director Martini would know the answer to that, but we're at 9 to 10 kids on a bus.
How-
That's accurate, things are going very well.
Okay, do they each have their own seat then, and then they just kind of stagger?
Yes.
Okay,
Siblings can be closer.
okay, great,
This guidance calls for 50%
okay.
dropping capacity in classrooms, a hybrid model, and buses to 50%. We'll need 100 more buses if we have to space them out at that level, and there's no district in the state that can buy one bus, much less 100 buses.
Wow.
And 916 Larry is not holding summer school, correct?
I have no idea.
We don't have busing there then. They're not having it, that's why I heard.
I don't think so.
They're
I
doing
don't-
the distance learning support. They're doing
Okay,
that.
all summer, okay.
So we have put together a planning team, 30 strong, that includes teachers, the elementary, middle school, high school, parents, staff, transportation, food service, custodial, to help us plan each of these scenarios. We'll work it in kind of 2 phases, each week, meeting for extended period of time in this planning team. Planning team for the first half of that block of time, giving input to a decision-making steering team. It's hard to make decisions with 30 people at the table, but we'll take all that input, make decisions, bring it back, and have a fluid process moving our way into August and the start of the year.
Well, I want to commend the superintendent and his admin staff and everybody for being one of those 26 school districts that's going ahead. I think, you know, in these unprecedented times, it'd be easy to just step back and say, wait, let's think about it, let's talk it over during the summer, but I'm just proud of the fact that we're forging ahead and doing what we can do. And having those surveys, they were really valuable.
Thank you for that feedback, and clearly we are forging ahead, but we're doing it very carefully, very deliberately, and of course following all the safety guidelines that
Right.
we need to. It was mentioned earlier, the Everyone Belongs series. I'm gonna have a hard time reading those dates from here, but we have 2 more community conversations, one next Monday and then another one next Wednesday. I've been on all of those. I don't know that if you're inclined to be on those, that you only can be on one. If you wanna be on more, you should do that. We have 2 more implicit bias trainings on the 29th and the 15th of July. we have had over 50 people on the community conversations. In fact, the second one, we had 65 people. We are just really excited with the local YMCA, Lake Center for Youth and Family, Mara Bain, who Member Kettle mentioned from the Mayor of Forest Lake, being on that, our planning and leadership team here, working directly with the Twin Cities YMCA and leading these conversations. They're doing just a marvelous job addressing racial justice and equity, which is my last slide. I won't get into a lot of detail here. I would need an hour presentation to add to our Assistant Principal Jeff Cabot's presentation on EOS. We've been doing that work for 2 years now, and we've been doing equity analysis and access to classes for longer than that. You know, we've been doing equity work for a long, long time. But I think we would agree, we're not there yet. And this is not to suggest that we're finally doing this work. But I would say that we are now called to much deeper action. And our work is urgent. And I would say it's urgent in 2 critical areas for sure. One is we need to examine and modify and adjust our very Eurocentric curriculum. We're no different than most school districts in the state. Most of us, if not all of us, grew up in a very Eurocentric education system. And we leave out a lot of culture, history, figures, leadership, perspective of Black, Brown, and Indigenous people. So that is a critical level of work, as is the second bullet, and that's identifying instructional practices that are currently utilized that are narrow in their focus or their perspective. Role plays, discussions, debates, argumentation topics that lend themselves for comments and viewpoints that are perhaps racist or biased or ignorant, and they seep out in those conversations. So we need to identify where that happens, and we need to start the school year with those no longer being appropriate, and being very clear about that. I would say, you know, if there's a discussion around the Confederate flag, it becomes an open ground for inappropriate, wrong, if not racist comments. The Confederate flag is racist, period. And it shouldn't, it's clearly not allowed in policy, and it shouldn't be allowed in conversation as a debate or a role play or an argumentation topic. So I have asked Brad Ward, our coordinator, teaching and learning coordinator, to lead this work. He is, with Director Georgie and myself, met with Brad, and we put together a team of about 15, 18 teachers, parents, and students to help do this work in bullet 1 and 2. And we have charged Brad and this team, and we'll be sitting at the table with him, to start the year with curriculum resources that bring voice, culture, history of Black, Brown, and Indigenous people day 1. Next year, we won't complete that work. It'll take longer. But if we simply say, let's get into a review process and let's make some changes, it'll take us years. So we have put a very urgent timeline to begin to make that, not eliminate all of what we teach. There's great value in much of what we teach. But we need to expand the voice and the perspective. And we need to be clear about what is off limits in terms of classroom conversations. You'll also see here classroom discussions on the bottom line on hate speech, being really clear with our students, doing some training and conversation with all students across the district on what do we mean by hate speech and what is our response as a district. Next would be expanding on and utilizing the concept that was developed and piloted this year at Forest Lake Elementary, and that's a safe space response team. A team of counselors and staff that are trained, capable, and ready to intervene with kids who use hate speech. It doesn't work to say knock it off, or you're suspended. But there needs to be deeper conversation, deeper dialogue, even engagement with families. And we need to have teams ready to do that work at every school. And of course, intensive PD on implicit bias, culturally responsive teaching and leadership. We've secured and lined up Hetty Walls and Ramon from our implicit bias training from the Twin Cities YMCA to be our keynote speakers when we come back to work in August and September, and they will be leading this work with all staff across the district for training. Again, we're being called to move and to change. And we're ready to do that.
And definitely the weight and the gravity of what's gone on has definitely impacted so many of us on a deep level. And I think if we start out with those response teams in the fall, I think that just lends for that good discussion and communication that we all need, that we can learn from each other and hear how that hurts and how that affects someone else when I say that, and look at their face and see how they're feeling when they've heard that. So I just welcome the idea of those safe space response teams. I think that's going to really have a good impact on our student body, and I'm glad to hear they're going to be in all buildings. So I remember when they presented at the board. Do you guys remember that? That was so
They're great.
powerful. So thank you. I just think that's excellent.
I'd like to put a footnote on all of this. I think, for me personally, one of our strategic focus goals is the excellence in high quality instruction. And one of the points we make on goal 2 is attract, develop, and retain highly qualified, high performing educators. We heard earlier that a lot of these students need models. They need good role models for themselves. So I hope that we can continue to find a way to increase minorities, especially in our staffing throughout what we do. Yes.
That concludes my reports, and answer more questions.
Hearing no other questions, we will move to the consent agenda. Do we have a motion to approve tonight's consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion?
Yes, on the consent agenda, I'd like to just add one thing. On the donations, again, which I tend to focus on the gifts to the district, I want to call out one of the gifts. We got $2,000 from Midco for the Everyone Belongs project. So on behalf of the district, I'd like to thank them for that participation in that effort.
Very nice. Thank you for pulling that.
Any other discussion? All right, with that, all those in favor of passing tonight's consent agenda signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes, and with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Massey.
Thank you. You actually just approved our next principal at Linwood Elementary, and you know that?
Yes.
And it's with great enthusiasm that I introduce to you tonight Gretchen Matson. For the first half of Gretchen's 20-year teaching career, she served as a classroom teacher, teaching grades 2 through 5. The last 10 years, she served as a gifted and talented coordinator, a literacy specialist, an instructional coach, a social emotional learning specialist, and a turnaround program specialist for Minneapolis Public Schools. Gretchen earned her Bachelor of Arts degree from Bemidji State University in elementary education, her master's degree in K-12 reading from the University of St. Thomas, and her educational specialist degree in leadership and administration from the University of St. Thomas. Gretchen resides in Forest Lake, in the Forest Lake community, and is excited for the opportunity to join the great staff at Linwood and to serve her community in this new role. And Gretchen will bring a deep knowledge of teaching and learning and a contagious passion for students. Welcome, Gretchen. If you'd like to say a few words, we'd welcome you.
So, thank you very much for letting me come and just tell you a little bit about myself and just the joy that I have to be able to be a part of this school district. It's been amazing to sit in that chair and just hear about all the things that this district is doing. One thing that you need to know about me is I spent my last 10 years in Minneapolis Public Schools. And one thing that we focus a lot on down there is equity. And from all of you and from the presentation tonight, I was just filled with excitement to hear that we're working on these things in Forest Lake. And it is the exact same things that we're working on in Minneapolis. And so when you're talking about white fragility, that book is amazing. When we're talking about the IBI, when we're talking about the work at the high school, you're exactly right, Dr. Massey. We are forging ahead and we're right where we need to be, and it is such critical timing. So just to kind of give you some background, Dr. Massey told you a few leadership positions that I've had in Minneapolis, and through those leadership opportunities, I've been able to grow and be grounded and find who I am as an educator, and it has really brought me to this point. And I'm thrilled and honored to be able to be the next leader at Linwood. I'm very excited about the work that we can continue to do with the forest there and how we can build that and really shout from the rooftops about all that we could do at Linwood and continue to do with the forest. So I'm very excited to be here, and it was very nice for you to allow me to say a few things. I stand up here and I think, wow, I wish my dad was here. He would be so proud of me. So thank you, and again, I really look forward to working with all of you in the future, and especially around equity and curriculum, and really making sure that we're thinking about every student every day.
You'll have a chance to do a school report like Jeff did tonight. You bring your family then.
Okay, great. And he was impressive. I
Yes, he
mean,
was.
I have some things to live up to, so thank you so much.
Welcome.
Let me just add something. I gotta tell you,
Okay.
just because this is what I do.
I know you
Your
remind
dad
me so
knows.
much of my
Your-
dad.
Your dad knows. Thank you. I
Yes.
think thank you very much.
Yes,
Your dad knows.
yeah, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Well, welcome, yes, welcome.
Yeah.
Your enthusiasm is contagious. Wow. We're excited to have you.
We'll move on to number 8. We have the wellness policy 546. Dr. Massey?
Yeah, every year we go through this policy, and you know that all school districts that participate in the National School Lunch and School Breakfast programs are required by the Healthy Hunger-Free Kids Act of 2010 to have a wellness policy that includes standards and nutrition guidelines for foods and beverage made available to students on campus during the school day, as well as specific goals for nutrition, promotion, and education, physical activity, and other school activities that promote student wellness. The policy committee has reviewed this policy, and there are no recommendations at this time, and administration recommends approval.
Do we have a motion to approve the wellness policy?
So moved. Second?
Second.
A motion and a second, discussion?
Well, I think this policy, and I've said it before, it had a really good look with the wellness committee, the Ranger Wellness Group in 2017, and they were so diligent about covering everything, and I just think it's such an excellent policy.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, member clerk, would you please take a roll call?
Member Kettle votes aye. Member Olson?
Aye.
Member Rayfield?
Aye.
Member Thiessen?
Aye.
Member Peterson?
Aye.
Member Luther is absent, and Member Corcoran.
Aye.
All right, we will move on to the community use of school district facilities and equipment policy 701.
Purpose of this policy is to provide guidelines for community use of school district facilities and equipment. The district is committed to making available the use of school facilities to all citizens of the district. School district facilities rules and regulations under this policy shall apply to all properties owned and managed by the school district and shall be in effect at all times when the school property is not in use for regular educational programs. The policy committee has reviewed this policy, and this policy is implemented largely by Director Corey McKinnon in community education. And there's one recommended change in this policy, and that is to specifically identify that as groups schedule facilities, that they do so with one scheduler, one primary scheduler versus multiple. You can imagine the confusion when multiple people are tripping over themselves to schedule gym time. So we're trying to be explicit and clear in this policy with updated language. With that, administration recommends approval.
Do we have a motion to approve the community use of school facilities?
So moved.
Second?
We have a motion and a second, discussion?
I just wanna speak to not have, when you didn't have one person, I know that the Hoops Club always had a person assigned, because it used to be that a lot of people would call, and I remember Patty, it would just be too much.
Yep.
So having one designated person, just, it's a lot less headaches, and it's really important for communication. So I like that change.
I like that a lot too, and Director McKenna explained it really well, and I think that this policy really protects our buildings, and it brought everybody to the table that needed to be there to make those critical decisions, how we can best move forward with tournaments, and he just keeps adding little pieces that really make it improve upon the process. So kudos to him and the group.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, Member Clerk, would you please take a roll call?
Member Olson.
Aye.
Member Raphael.
Aye.
Member Tyson.
Aye.
Member Peterson.
Aye.
Member Whitmer is absent. Member Corcoran.
Aye.
And Member Kettle votes aye.
All right, we'll move on to the request permission to bid the CLC demolition and remodeling project, including Forest View Elementary, HVAC controls, and not that one we're going with. Director Martini.
Thank you. Good evening again. We've asked Martin Pevsner Engineering, along with Kraus Anderson, to design and manage that demolition and remodeling of the portions of the CLC, along with the HVAC controls for Forest View Elementary. If approved tonight, we would open bids on the 20th of August and bring them back for your consideration on September 3rd. If you desire any more information attached to this agenda item, there are 5 slides related to the CLC that we have shared with you previously, but it just gives you a view of scope and that. So we ask you to approve our ability to advertise these bids.
Move to approve, oh, A3.
I was gonna say, ask if there was any questions for Director
Oh.
Martini.
Yeah, can you, I know I'm sure you've told us already, but can you explain again the building? The middle will be kept.
The middle will be retained,
And
so
then
the
the-
southern portion close to
Right.
Forest Lake Elementary
Yes.
will be demolished,
Okay.
including the 3-story areas.
Okay.
And the old Montessori wing on the north end would also be demolished. This project then would remodel that remaining portion with not only roofing, but HVAC, some alternates for bathrooms, scope alternates, because we need this project to fit in the $5 million range, and we are expecting the HVAC controls at Forest View to be around $250,000.
Thank you for explaining it again.
Any other questions?
And then, will there be a wrecking ball, or will they implode it, or, I'm just so
They certainly-
curious.
They certainly will not implode it. And yes, at times, they would use the suspended ball, yes.
Will there be a singer on the?
It will be Miley Cyrus will be on the deck.
They've been demolishing buildings next to where I work, and they oftentimes use a backhoe and just push the pieces in piece by piece.
Okay.
It's very,
Yeah, I've seen it.
it's very undramatic.
Well, I've been driving by there because my community garden bed's over that way, and I'm like, it's gonna be pretty big to knock down, but keep it.
We don't anticipate any detonations.
Don't anticipate that.
We'll have to go watch and see what they do.
Well, I'm excited for what it's gonna be used for, and
Yeah.
STEP program can get in there, and,
That's great.
All right, with that, I would entertain a motion to approve the request for permission to bid.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second, discussion?
I just want to add that the Building and Grounds Committee, of which I am a member, has reviewed this indefinitely, and we all support exactly what's going on.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, Member Kettle, would you please take a roll call?
Member Clerk, Member Raphael.
Aye.
I was thinking of turtles there for a second.
Raphael.
Tyson, Member Tyson.
long eye, you got it right.
Yep.
Aye.
Member Peterson.
Aye.
Luther, if Member Luther is absent, Member Corcoran,
Aye.
Member Kettle votes aye, Member Olson.
Aye.
All right, with that, we will move to the approval of the 1921 employment terms and conditions for the activities director, Dr. Massey.
Thank you. This would be the last of the agreements, folks that are operating under agreements. And much like the other agreements, the significant change here would be a salary change in the first year of 3% and 2% in the second year. Again, following the structure of the other contracts. And with that, administration recommends approval.
Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All right, discussion.
I just had a question about, at the last meeting, we postponed it.
Yes.
Was there any significant difference or, I mean,
No,
Yes.
the primary issue was he was on vacation when we sent them out for
Okay.
review.
so you just,
He picked it up within a day of it showing up on the agenda, and he wanted to just talk through a couple of pieces. So it was just a matter of time.
okay, cool. Thank you.
Member Tyson?
Can I just ask for a quick clarification? It's page 8 of the document, but I believe it's page 11. When it carries over, what is the 50%? Trying to figure out in Premier how to get to that. It's 50% paid back. Was that of the moving expenses if he takes advantage of that?
Yes, it's the moving section, it would be the, and again, this agreement resembles the administrative
Okay.
contracting, and in particular, the high school assistant principal salary level, I should say. But there is a moving clause, and there's a payback portion there as well.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, Member Kettle, would you please take a roll call?
Member Peterson,
Aye.
Member Luther is absent, Member Corcoran,
Aye.
Member Kettle votes aye, Member Olson,
Aye.
Member Raphael,
Aye.
and Member Tyson.
Aye.
All right, seeing nothing under discussion items tonight, review your calendar dates, upcoming calendar dates. And with that, I would entertain a motion to recess to go into a closed session.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second to go into recess. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, we'll recess.
Changing my mind, I kinda like this.